So we're extremely privileged and proud to offer for sale what can only be described as two of the most collectible supercars in the world. We've acquired these two cars from a very important collection in the UK. Both have delivery mileage, both have excellent provenance, and they're just incredible cars. So without further ado, let's reveal what's under the covers. So some of you will know that these two cars are very closely affiliated. That is because the Maserati MC12 was actually based on the Ferrari Enzo. In today's video, I'm going to show you 15 key differences between the two cars, and at the end, we'll try and come to some sort of conclusion as to which one is the better buy. Okay, so just before we get into the video, I just wanted to give you a brief history on how these cars are so closely linked. So Ferrari and Maserati have been closely affiliated for a number of years. That's because they've both been owned under the Fiat umbrella. But in the early 2000s, Ferrari actually owned a controlling interest in Maserati. And having produced the Ferrari Enzo in 2002, they wanted Maserati to get back into racing. They didn't want it to compete with themselves in Formula One. So they said, right, here's the Ferrari Enzo, here's the engine, here's the chassis, make a race version of this, and then we're going to enter it into the GT championships. So what happened is just 4 months later, designed by Frank Stephenson, Maserati created the MC12 race car. But in order to homologate that car so it can compete in the races, they had to build a road version, and that is what we've got here. Okay, so our first key difference between the two cars is the size. So the MC12 is quite a lot longer. It's actually a foot longer than the Enzo. It's also quite a bit wider. So this rear wing, which is actually wider than the body of the car, which is quite unusual in itself, is 6'6" wide. I mean, this car is massive. It's got so much road presence. And the reason why they made it larger than the Enzo was purely for aerodynamics, because with a bigger surface area of car, they can do a lot more with the aero. So they have a longer rear overhang, a longer front overhang, and they extended the wheelbase. It is worth mentioning on the length that there are in fact 25 long-nose MC12s and 25 short-nose MC12s. That's because the FIA changed the rules of the race car, having to make them shorter, so Maserati had to make another 25. It's only 150 millimeters difference, actually really hard to tell. We had to get our tape measure out, but we've confirmed that this is in fact one of the long-nose MC12s. Okay, second key difference is the doors. So with the Ferrari Enzo, the door handle is actually hidden away under here, and when you open them, they are butterfly doors. Whereas on the MC12, the door handles are fully exposed on the top of the door panel, and they open in a more traditional way, like so. So our third key difference is the roof. So on the Maserati MC12, it features a Targa roof, which is removable. Apparently it was a fairly easy design feature to add, arguably makes the car more desirable. And although there's nowhere to actually store the roof, I mean, who wouldn't want to listen to that V12 with the roof off? Compare that to the Enzo, which because of the door design, you get this central spine here, and of course that makes it impossible to have a removable roof. So key difference number 4 is just the general exterior styling of the car, and there's loads of differences here. In fact, the only thing they kept from the Enzo was in fact the windshield. But just to point out a few important bits, obviously the roof scoop here, that was built for the race car, but it is still functional on the road car because it does feed cooling into the engine. Obviously this massive rear spoiler back here, beautifully sculpted, although it's not quite as functional as the race car spoiler, which creates more downforce. That's definitely going to help improve lap times. Get these big louvres here in the front wings, and I think here is where the most sort of signature design feature of the MC12 is these strakes here on the bonnet. And Frank Stephenson said himself there is a legal requirement that you can't have your air intakes opened, so you can't fit what he said is a baby's head. So you had to create something to protect that, and so there you have these beautiful strakes. So now onto the Ferrari Enzo's design. Of course, such an iconic design. Obviously that very clearly defined triangular front end, which is aged, I think, remarkably well. You get the rear sort of hips with those big air intakes at the side. But look, there's no big rear spoiler on the Enzo, there's no big louvres in the front. Ferrari got all the aero to go underneath the car, but for me it's just a more simplistic, a more elegant design than the MC12. I mean, both are just such incredible looking cars, and you wouldn't really know when they're side by side that they're actually built on the same chassis. So number 5 is the transmission. So Ferrari call it F1, Maserati call it Cambio Corsa, but it is essentially the same thing. It's a sequential manual gearbox using paddle shifts to change gear. There are a couple of notable differences on the MC12. They have different gear ratios. They've also lowered the red line, so it can't rev quite as high as the Enzo. These are all little things to help ensure the Maserati was not quicker than the Enzo. Both cars actually have a feature called half gear, where you go up a gear and to come down into a half gear, which is just a little bit more clutch friendly when you're moving the car at lower speeds. Okay, so key difference number 6 is the engine. And taking a look at both engines, I guess they look pretty different on first glance. You have that lovely carbon fiber engine cover on the Enzo, and you have this beautiful pearlescent white engine cover on the MC12. Another difference is how you keep the engine compartments up. So on the Enzo, you have to have this manual rod, which you put in yourself to keep it up, whereas on the MC12, you have those automatic rods, which just need clicking into place. Another big difference on these engines is the power. So 650 brake horsepower on the Enzo. Bear in mind, this is the same engine, it's just been detuned for the MC12 to 620 brake horsepower. That's basically Ferrari just saying the Enzo has bragging rights over the MC12 for power. It has got a higher top speed, it's got a faster 0 to 62 miles an hour, but the Maserati MC12 is a bit quicker around the track. It was quicker around the Top Gear track, it's quicker around the Nürburgring, and that is basically all down to this extra aero and the fact it's got grippier tyres. So number 7 on our list is the brakes. So on the Ferrari Enzo, it features carbon ceramic brakes. It's actually the first Ferrari road car to ever feature carbon ceramics. Unlike the MC12, which has steel brakes or cast iron brakes, we think that was due to the regulations with the racing again not permitting ceramic discs, but could quite easily have been Ferrari saying, we don't want it to brake quite as well as the Enzo. Number 8, the windows. So one thing Ferrari did let Maserati add to the car was power windows. So instead of the wind up on the Enzo, you actually get a button to put the windows up. Definitely a little upgrade. I have to say though, there is something quite charming about having that old school manual wind up window, even if it is a bit more hassle. Okay, so number 9, we're going to see if there are any differences in storage space. So on the MC12, you do have a little section here, cargo net in the door panel. We also get that on the passenger side. There is also another cargo area just behind the seats here where you can store a few items. Little cubby hole here in the center console, and there is also a little cubby hole here just under the handbrakes. Not the easiest place to access. Doesn't quite fit an iPhone, but does just about fit a little credit card holder in this section here. Now there is one more little section just up front, which just takes a little bit of effort to get in there. So here we have that final bit of luggage space on the MC12. So you've got to, first of all, put the front axle lift up, unplug the lights, get all 4 clips undone, get your friend to help you take the bonnet off, and there you have that little bit of luggage space here. Currently, the toolkit is there, but if you don't fancy the toolkit, not a bad place to keep a sandwich. Okay, so now onto the Enzo. So you don't get the little storage nets in the door panels, but you do get the storage net behind the seats. In the center console, you get a much bigger area, so you can store quite a few more items there than you can in the MC12, but you don't get that little area under the handbrake. Up front, you've got a nice area which is a little bit easier to access than the MC12. So with what seems like a more relatively straightforward way of opening a bonnet, you also do get a little bit more luggage space up here than you do on the MC12. Not enough for a full suitcase, but you know, maybe a deck of cards and a sleeping bag. Key difference number 10 is that on the Enzo you actually get a rear view mirror, so you can see directly what's behind you. The other cool thing about having this glass partition is you can see the V12 just over your shoulder. Whereas in the MC12 you don't get any rear view mirror. That's because you have the firewall back here and the engine compartment is totally closed, so you can't see anything. So you're totally reliant on the wing mirrors, which to be fair, stick quite far out, so you do actually get pretty decent visibility. Number 11 is the steering wheel. So in the Ferrari, you get this very Ferrari-esque steering wheel with the carbon fiber at the top with the LED section which lights up at the optimum time to change gear. Get your little prancing horse in the middle, but the big thing here is all the buttons are actually on the steering wheel. So you get the indicators actually on the steering wheel where your thumbs are. You also get your reverse button here, you get your race mode button, you also get the front axle lifter, and then on the center console is where you have your start button. But on the MC12, you get no buttons at all on the steering wheel, just a more simple steering wheel, but you do get the carbon fiber at the top. No LEDs though. The aluminium gear shift paddles here instead of the carbon like on the Enzo, but all the buttons are actually down here on the center console. So you get your reverse button, your front axle lifter, your race mode button. You also get the start button here like you do on the Enzo. But nice little touch is you do get a little Maserati clock. Okay, so on to number 12, and the key difference here is the headlights. So you'll notice they've got quite a different headlight design anyway, but the big change here is that the Enzo headlights are covered and the MC12 headlights, quite unusually, have no cover at all. And having looked into this, there's no obvious reason why, and we've noted the MC12 Corsa, the race version, have all got headlight covers. So we think it's only purely down to aesthetics, so that the blue paint is really emphasized in the contrast against the white, and that there's no cover sort of skewing that. Okay, so number 13, I'm going to show you some of the differences between the interior materials. So whilst this is a carbon fiber tub, and there is some carbon fiber on the steering wheel and on the center console there, Maserati have chosen this sort of black mesh cloth. It's called Britex. I think it's designed to look like carbon fiber, but you get it on the top of the dashboard, a little bit here on the door panels and behind the seats too. They use obviously this perforated leather on the seats, which doesn't age all that well. And then you get the aluminium trim down the center console as well. So the differences with the Enzo is, at least on this spec, they use a much smoother leather, which looks obviously great in this color, but it just feels like it's aged slightly better than the MC12. There's also extensive use of carbon fiber, a lot more than the MC12, so you get the whole dashboard in carbon. The full door panels are all in carbon. Down the center console is all in carbon instead of the aluminium. And on the seat, you get little trims in the seats for the seat belts, also in carbon fiber, whereas on the MC12, I think it's sort of like a black plastic, but it definitely feels like the Enzo interior is just a slight level above. So number 14 is the production numbers. So, as I touched on earlier in the video, there are 50 MC12 road cars, but there are also another 12 race cars built. So 62 MC12s in total. As I mentioned before, 25 were initially built to homologate the race car, but due to the regulations change, they had to build another 25. Compare that with the Enzo. So they initially set out to make 349 cars, but such was the demand, they thought, let's make another 50. So 399 is the official production run, but they made a 400th car specifically for the Pope. So it was gifted to him as the 400th car. It is rumored that there was a few more Enzos that went out the Ferrari back door, but we'll never really know for sure. So our final key difference is the color schemes. So with the Enzo, the vast majority of them you're going to see are in that traditional Ferrari red, Rosso Corsa. There are some other colors too. We've sold a few black ones, we've sold a yellow one, and I've seen a couple of blues and silvers as well, but most of them are in that red. The interiors again vary a little bit. You'll get a lot in black, a lot of red, but the nice thing about this car, it's got that Koyo interior, or the tan. That's exactly how it came out of the factory, which is really, really rare. Compare that with the MC12. All 50 cars left the factory exactly like this, in that blue and white color scheme, the Maserati colors, and you get all that beautiful pinstriping, loads of detail on it. So I think this is how it should be. I know it'd be nice to say, oh, I've got one a bit different, and there are some that have been sort of repainted afterwards, but let's be honest, with only 50 cars, the chances of running into another one and thinking, oh, he's got the same one as me, are pretty slim. So to try and summarize, what do I think is the better buy? So to put these cars into some context, the MC12 has done just over 200 miles. The Enzo has done under 150 miles from new. So clearly these cars are going to appeal to a collector or an investor. And I know that's going to annoy some people, but you have to think of these cars as the pinnacle of automotive art. So what's the better investment, or what's the most collectible of the two cars? I mean, look, Ferrari is clearly the stronger brand. It's got a lot more history and pedigree when it comes to producing cars like this. And I think it's clear to see that they set out to make the MC12 a little bit inferior to the Enzo. But I actually think the MC12 could be superior. You know, look at the build numbers first and foremost. Only 50 cars compared to 400. I mean, that's significant when it comes to the collectability. The fact that this is also a homologation special, so it has that racing pedigree. I mean, the MC12 race car dominated GT racing for a number of years, so that really adds weight to its argument. Then you've got to think it has a removable roof, so that adds another layer of desirability. But look, the Enzo is such an iconic design, named after the founder himself, is obviously hugely significant. And if you're a Ferrari collector, you're probably going to want the Enzo in your collection more than an MC12. But, you know, the MC12 is more of a unicorn. You know, you're not going to run into another one of these. And when you look at what cars have really gone through the roof in value, see McLaren F1, more recently the Pagani Zonda, you know, that's not all about the brand. You know, you've got to look at the car on its own merits. Perhaps a more fitting argument or a fitting comparison is the Mercedes CLK GTR or the Porsche GT1, which both also with GT racing cars and homologation specials, and they, look at the values of those today. The MC12 hasn't quite got there yet, but I think it will. So what is the better buy? For me, as an investment, I'd go with the MC12. Maybe as a collector, certainly a Ferrari collector, you'd go with the Enzo, but let's be honest, if you can afford one, you could probably afford both. But look, we hope that these cars will find a new home very soon, or in all likelihood, a new collection. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Please do let us know in the comments which car you would rather have. But look, give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel, and we will have another video for you very soon.